I was happening, y'all. It's your boy Rico from RicoScores, and doesn't it feel good to be 2-0 right now, y'all? 2-0, the Washington Commanders 2-0. Man, I have so many things to dive into, man. First of all, it just feels good to win in general. But then a big away win after being down that much, that's incredible. But y'all know me, man. We're going to go position group by position group. We're going to talk coaching, first of all. Bieniemy, most notably. We're going to talk about the quarterbacks, the running backs, the wide receivers, offensive line, tight ends, defensive linemen, linebackers, DBs, everything. We're going position group by position group. Y'all already know the order. But I'm also going to break down a lot of random stats. Some of these stats are crazy, too. Like the Commanders haven't done this in how many years? It's ridiculous. So I'm coming fully loaded for this game review, man. I'm just super excited. First of all, hey man, Commanders, appreciate the win, but to save us heart attacks, save the fan base some heart attacks and some extra stress on their life that we don't even need to deal with, that we shouldn't have to deal with, can we go on a 32-6 run to start the game rather than did in the middle of it / like halfway through the second quarter? Can we do that? I mean, we got dominated the first quarter. The Broncos dominated the first quarter. We won the second quarter, but didn't necessarily dominate it. Then we dominated the third quarter and halfway through the fourth quarter, and then those last couple of minutes, it got a little ugly. Can we go on a 32-6 run to start a game, please? That would be nice. I mean, y'all have achieved things through these first 2 weeks that the Commanders haven't done, the Redskins, Washington football team, whatever you want to call them, the Burgundy and Gold haven't done in years. But can we go take it to a next level with that right there? Also, man, again, since when do we win games like that? Down 21-3. When do we do that? The Burgundy and Gold down 21-3, find a way to win a game. And not only win a game, at a certain point, we were up, what, like 35-27 or something like that? Like, we not only did we take over the game and take the lead, we were up by 11. We went down 21-3 to up 11. That's incredible in its own self. Like, the run we had between the second quarter and halfway through the fourth quarter was legendary. Like, if we end up making the playoffs this year or doing anything significant this year, going to the playoffs, maybe winning a playoff game, you never know what can happen. If we end up accomplishing any real goals this year, we're all going to look back at this game like that was the one that triggered it. This is the one that sent us on the trajectory that we're currently on. If we end up winning a Super Bowl within the next few years, we're going to take a look at this game like this game showed that no matter how ugly things get, you can always figure it out. And I feel like Sam Howell is a big part of that. Bieniemy is a big part of it. That we have a lot of like leadership guys, emotional guys, spirits of the team type of guys. But Sam Howell perfectly embodies next play. Doesn't matter how bad things are looking. Doesn't matter if we have the momentum or not. Sam Howell doesn't believe momentum. It doesn't matter if we have it or not. He's going to go out there and do what he has to do. I mean, there are so many guys that we can shout out for game balls. We're going to talk about it. We got Sam Howell, Bieniemy, Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Deron Payne, Logan Thomas, man, Emmanuel Forbes, the rookie. There's so many things we're going to talk about. Jamin Davis. We got to talk about it, of course, in this video. Also, shouts out to the Commanders because we are now still undefeated under Josh Harris, 2-0, and under Sam Howell as our starting quarterback, 3-0, going back to that Week 18 game against the Cowboys last year. And, of course, we're undefeated also with Bieniemy as our offensive coordinator. And, boy, he cooked. That boy cooked today, man. Before we even dive into everything, I'm going to give y'all some statistics now, some interesting statistics. We have more that's coming throughout this video that's probably going to end up being like 30-40 minutes long. But before we even get into everything going position group by position group, because that's what I'm going to present to y'all more statistics. First of all, 35 points scored by the Commanders, the most we've scored since 2020, literally like during the pandemic, during like the middle, the ugly part of the pandemic. Also, 18-point comeback, largest since 1990 for the Commanders, Washington football team, Burgundy and Gold, Redskins, whatever you want to call them. And also 2-0 for our first time since 2011. That is crazy, dog. I was still in high school. That's amazing. There are literally 12-year-old kids out there that are seeing the Commanders 2-0 for the first time in their lives. That is insane. That is really bad. Also, it's crazy because we're mid-September and our season doesn't already feel over. That's interesting in itself. Usually by mid-September, we're like, oh, here we go again. Should we start tanking? Should we start going for draft picks? I mean, that's what a lot of people say. Not necessarily me, but here we go. We're mid-September and still haven't lost the game. Let's go. And me as a Georgia Bulldog fan, I'm smiling too. Both of my teams undefeated right now, so I'm having the time of my life. But also, shouts out to Ron Rivera. This is his 100th regular season win as a head coach in his career. The big 1-0. Also, this is his first win against the Broncos as a head coach. Remember, Ron Rivera going against the Broncos in the Super Bowl lost that game. If he would have won that game, he would have already had a win against the Broncos in the Super Bowl under his belt. Most notably for me, being from where I'm from, Westlake High School alum, all of that type of stuff, Southwest Atlanta, Cam Newton would have a ring. So, hey, man, all of that ties into each other. It all comes full circle. Ron Rivera got some slight revenge here. Of course, you got to win a Super Bowl to get full revenge, but we'll take it. Also, we're one of only 9 undefeated teams remaining in the NFL right now. We're going to dive into that towards like the end of the video after we run through the position groups, who those other teams are, and are the Commanders arguably the best team out of those undefeated teams? Do we have the best resume? We'll see. Also, at a certain point, with under 8 minutes left in the second quarter, when we were down 3-21, win probability showed us losing because the Broncos had a 96.3% win probability against us at that point. So to come back from advanced stats, all kinds of metrics showing that you have a 96.3% chance to lose, and you somehow dive into that other 3.7%, that's phenomenal, man. The resiliency, that's the main thing about this game that we're going to take from it. If I describe it in one word, resilient, man, or can't go. That's not one word, but can't go. We ain't going. We ain't just lying down and letting you take this when you're going to have to earn that. Up 21-3, that's cute. Yeah, that's cute and all, but did you win? You know what I'm saying? So can't go, resiliency, whatever. Led by Sam Howell, Eric Bieniemy, the entire team, the defensive line especially. But before we dive into everything, and again, we're going to go position group by position group, quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, all the way down to the DBs, everything. We're even going to talk about that 2-point conversion at the end where technically Benjamin St. Juste should have been called for that pass interference. But the refs owed us one from last year. We're going to talk about that. But before we do, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Right now, YouTube is tripping. So if you want to support the channel in any way, of course, leave the like, subscribe, hit the bell next to that. But also, if you want to donate directly to the channel, I have the Street Scores Cash App, $ RicoScores, also the PayPal, WilliamAC94@gmail.com. And man, make sure y'all stay tuned for all of the content because I'm coming with game reviews, game previews, daily updates. I'm getting back to working on content and coming out with videos every day, no matter what. Like soon after this game, say maybe tomorrow, the day after that, I'm gonna come with a lot of advanced statistics and Pro Football Focus grades for a lot of our best and worst players, all kinds of stuff. So any news updates, injury updates, I got y'all, like the Deron Payne injury, everything. I got y'all covered. The full one-stop shop for Commanders information, news, and opinion. So man, without further ado, let's get it.
You tell your family you're gonna be a commander.
First of all, we gotta clap it up to Eric Bieniemy. We're gonna start with the coaching, most notably Eric Bieniemy. I mean, Jack Del Rio, shouts out to him for making adjustments because our defense, at a certain point, our drives were allowed touchdown, allowed touchdown, allowed touchdown. Then I believe it was your forced fumble. Then it was 3 and out, 3 and out. After that, I lost track. But like, our defense had a complete 180. The offense was always decent. Our offense wasn't bad to start. I kept saying that live. While we were down 21-3, I was literally saying our defense is atrocious, but our offense wasn't that bad. We just missed 2 field goals. One on Cameron Cheeseman. We'll get to that when we get to special teams. And then another on, I just felt like Ron Rivera shouldn't have even tried to kick that one, in my opinion. But even so, that was still a makeable field goal by Joey Slye, technically by NFL standards. So it should have been like 9-21 technically, which isn't that bad. We were moving the ball. We just couldn't get touchdowns. Wasn't good, but the offense also just wasn't terrible. It was the defense that was terrible. So Jack Del Rio, also shouts out to him for the adjustments he made. But Eric Bieniemy is a Mr. Adjustments. Since when have the Commanders, anybody in burgundy and gold uniform, Redskins football team, Commanders, whoever, made adjustments? Like, this is not working, let's do this, and it works. How long has it been since we've had that on either side of the ball, but especially offense, man? Again, shouts out to Jack Del Rio, but Eric Bieniemy, boy, you in your bag tonight, man. He was in his bag today, man. He was deep in it, boy, pulling out anything he could find, and it almost got to a point wherever he wanted to do work. Hey, 40-yard screen pass, let's do it. Little scramble by Sam Howell, let's do it. Double team touchdown, Terry McLaurin covered. Let's just throw a dot right there. Like anything Eric Bieniemy called, it just seemed like it was like he couldn't go wrong at a certain point, basically. So he was super deep in his bag, and he just had this magical touch of like he just couldn't go wrong. But also, let's bring up a really interesting stat. So Washington's highest offensive output under Scott Turner, 50 games worth of Scott Turner, 34 points. After only 2 games with Eric Bieniemy, we scored 35. So it took us 2 games to already outscore any game that Scott Turner's ever had being the Commanders offensive coordinator, and that was 50 games worth. Took 2 games for Eric Bieniemy to do what Scott Turner couldn't do in 50. That's amazing in itself. Also, man, I mean, again, on top of the fact that he's the best in-game adjuster, I kept telling y'all, man, fantasy football wise, I think the Commanders are going to put up a lot of points, but it's going to be really hard to pinpoint who's going to be the guy getting a lot of those points a lot of the time, because we just have so many weapons. We have so many running backs, so many wide receivers, so many tight ends, and a quarterback that can also throw and run. So it's really hard to pinpoint, oh, okay, unless this guy goes off, the Commanders won't win. We don't have one of those offenses. Like the Vikings, Justin Jefferson's getting 15 targets. He's going to. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, because they don't have too many weapons outside of him. Literally, if we're going to move the ball has to touch Justin Jefferson's hands. When it comes to us, it can be anybody. Curtis Samuel out of the backfield. Curtis Samuel down the field. Jahan Dotson making work. Several tight ends that catch passes. We had 3 tight ends to catch passes today. We had Logan Thomas with a touchdown. We're going to get to that when we get to the tight ends, but John Bass even had a deep pass, beautiful ball by Sam Howell there. Cole Turner made some plays. He had like 2 catches as well. Then the running backs catch the ball out of the field. Antonio Gibson had a ridiculous screen. So did Brian Robinson. And that's another thing too. The Commanders finally effectively run screens. It took Eric Bieniemy 2 games to do that. It took Scott Turner 50 to not be able to do it. And it took Eric Bieniemy 2 games to get it down, because we were looking against the Cardinals last week like, oh man, maybe it's just a burgundy and gold thing. Maybe we're just not allowed to run screens. Maybe other NFL teams can, but we can't. We struggled in the first game against the Arizona Cardinals with screens. Today, screens were beautiful. Not all of them worked, but we had like 4 beautifully ran, executed, and called screens. Eric Bieniemy called it at the right time. The offensive line blocked for it very well, and Sam Howell executed it. The recipient of the screen did their part, and even the guys that didn't get the screen, like the receivers and guys, were out there making the right blocks on the perimeter. That's huge. That's a big part of the offense. That's why Georgia's so successful, because we demand our wide receivers to block. Eric Bieniemy's doing the same thing out of these guys. Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, De'Ami Brown. You're going to block as a receiver, and you see the fruits of the labor right there with how effective our screen game is. It isn't just offensive line. There's timing. There's blocking from receivers. There's offensive linemen getting to the second level, which is a rarity. You don't typically think about wide receivers as blockers. You don't think about offensive linemen getting up and blocking DBs. You require all of those almost kind of anomalies to work out to have an effective screenplay, and we had like 3 or 4 of them today, maybe even more than that I just can't remember. So back to my main point, one big thing is why, again, fantasy football wise, the Commanders are a troubling team, because Washington at a certain point in this game, before the game was even, I think it was like somewhere in the 3rd quarter, had 9 players with at least 2 receptions, the most in a single game in franchise history. So Eric Bieniemy has already opened this offense up to more possibilities. A defense has to worry about more players than ever before in burgundy and gold history. Even the times when we win the Super Bowls, we were one of the best teams in NFL history, just running the league, late 90s, late 80s, early 90s. Our offense has never been that open. 9 different guys with at least 2 receptions. That's a lot in Sam Howell, but that's also, if anything, more so on Eric Bieniemy for getting all of these guys opportunities again. If we continue to do that, that's going to make defensive coordinators stay up at night like, man, we don't even know who to stop. Who do we cover? You worry about Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and De'Ami Brown. Here comes Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson, and the tight ends. You worry about the running backs. You try to shut down Terry McLaurin, Brian Robinson, because Terry McLaurin was our number 1 receiver today. Brian Robinson was our number 1 running back today. And you can argue, I guess, Logan Thomas or John Bass were our number 1 tight end today, receiving wise. Let's say you somehow find a way as a defensive coordinator to get rid of those 3 guys in the game. You still have Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel, Antonio Gibson going crazy. You still have the other tight ends going crazy. It's just, what can you do? As a defensive coordinator and as a defensive personnel, the players on the field, who do you focus on? Because as a defense, the way the NFL is set up is literally set up for offense to beat defense. Anytime there's a 50-50 situation, the offense tends to have the advantage. And so as a defense, you have to do what you can to focus on stopping one particular thing. Playing perfectly balanced on your heels is never going to work. If you're going against a really good run team, then you got to focus on stopping the run. If you're going against a really good pass team, you got to stop the pass and just allow them to run and hope it works out. With us right now, what do you stop? honestly, as a defensive coordinator, I'm giving y'all homework. You watching this video, go back and look at that game. Who do you focus on stopping? And then who do you just live with beating you? And then that's the conundrum that the Broncos had to deal with today. That's the conundrum that a lot of defensive coordinators are going to have to deal with moving forward for this offense, and why I feel like we're going to be a very explosive 30 points per game level offense, at least 20-something points per game offense, because literally, what do you stop? Eric Bieniemy was in his bag today, and I don't even think he reached all the way to the bottom, but he did just enough, like, okay, down 21-3. So how about we go from being down 18 to up 11? And then I'm going to chill out on the bag. I'm not going to show them everything because we still got to save some secrets for when we go against our division rivals like the Eagles, the Giants, and the Cowboys. So he couldn't go all the way in the bag. Boy, that boy was knee deep in it, though. I'm not going to lie. So Eric Bieniemy, shouts out to you, man. I mean, we're already 15 minutes in the video. We basically just talked about Eric Bieniemy so far, along with the 7-minute intro. I always apologize for that, but I mean, with wins, man, the intros are going to be long because it's just always so much fun. And I gave y'all advanced stats, so y'all should be straight. Moving on. Sam Howell is different, dog. Let's just go ahead and talk about the quarterbacks. Of course, it's regular season. It's not preseason, so we only have one quarterback to talk about, which is a good thing. Hopefully, we don't get to a point where we got to talk about more than one quarterback in a game. Sam Howell's different, dog. Shouts out to Al Galdi because he worded it perfectly. Number one big picture takeaway from this entire game is Sam Howell. Yes, the sacks and tip passes are problems, but he overcame constant pressure, losing his tight end one to a concussion, a dirty hit, should have been ejected. Like I said, in the game, like live stream, if you haven't been pulling up to the live streams, I don't know what you're doing because we're all breaking down everything that's going on play by play, laughing, crying when things go wrong, everything. It's a beautiful stream. Make sure you pull up. But I talked about live, and I'm digressing for a minute, that dirty hit literally hit all 5 reasons to get ejected. First of all, he launched, left his feet. That's already one reason to get ejected. Also, it was slightly late, not very late, but still late enough. Also, it was a hit to the helmet. That's a big reason. You can't hit to the helmet. He led with his shoulder or helmet. That's another big reason. That alone is a reason to get ejected. And then just like the way he aimed upwards, like literally, I know like you can launch without having to aim upwards like that. Like he literally tried to kill him. There were like 5 distinct reasons. He like did the whole checklist. All right, check, let me get ejected, check that, let me get ejected, check that. He hit all of them, which was just crazy. But going back to what I was saying, losing his tight end one to a concussion and a 21-3 second quarter deficit to go 27 of 39 for 299 yards, 1 yard away from 300, man. I wish we would have got that. 2 touchdowns and 0 interceptions and a big road win. You got to remember, this is Sam Howell's first game playing at that level, like at that like actual elevation. I talked about that in my preview video before we even played the Denver Broncos, that Sam Howell has never played at an elevated level like that. That's different. It literally affects the Denver Broncos have the best home field advantage in the NFL. I don't care what anybody says. To have to play that high up, that altitude with less oxygen is insane. You saw at a certain point, we'll talk about this maybe when we get to the defensive line. I hope I don't forget by the time we get there, but there was a certain point, my boy Rich pointed it out, like in the fourth quarter, in those last couple of drives for the Broncos, our entire starting defensive line was on the sideline a couple of those plays. They were gassed. And maybe under normal circumstances, playing anywhere else in the NFL other than that high up in Denver, maybe our guys wouldn't have been out of stamina like that. That's huge. So shouts out to Sam Howell for that as well. His 3rd career NFL start and going out there being that resilient down 21-3 with that oxygen. I mean, just think about it. He's from North Carolina. He played for UNC. There was no reason for him to ever play against Denver in college. And then now he's been on the Commanders under 3 stars. This is his first time ever playing at an elevated altitude like that in his entire life. We have a few players on this team that's probably done it. Sam Howell never in his life has played with a lack of oxygen like that. So I'm just very proud of him. On top of everything else he did, just to do that, he ended up with a 108.8 QBR. That's phenomenal. Again, just the stat line is so beautiful. I just feel like I got to read it again. I just feel like we gotta go with that one again. That was beautiful. I'm gonna read it from a different screen this time. 27-39, and a lot of those weren't his fault. Even some of those were also thrown out of bounds. I remember like 2 or 3 of them that were just complete throwouts. I'm not mad at that. When you look at his true completion percentage, one of those advanced stats guys or organizations websites is gonna come out with it eventually. But he technically didn't have 27 true completions because 2 or 3 of them were good throw out of bounds. Like nothing's there, get it out of bounds real quick type of thing. And then also you had a couple of drops, and so to me, he was very accurate today. Overall, sometimes he wasn't, but overall he was. Especially that touchdown to Terry McLaurin. Come on, dog. That was a dot. Terry McLaurin wasn't even necessarily open. That was a complete double team. To have the confidence and the accuracy to throw that, man, the chemistry. I mean, if this would have been last year against the Cowboys, I'm not sure if he completes that. But this entire offseason being QB1 has paid off with him getting all of those reps as QB1. Definitely has paid off with him gaining chemistry with guys like that. I don't think, as great as he was even against the Cowboys, those deep passes, I'm not sure if he completes that pass last year against the Cowboys, because that was super double team. Shouts out to Terry McLaurin for jumping and high pointing that ball as well as you could. If Terry McLaurin wasn't such a dog, a top 10 receiver, to me at least a top 8 receiver, that even with Sam Howell throwing a dot like that, it may not have been completed. Terry McLaurin jumped at like the perfect time to jump. Literally, as everybody else is coming down or haven't jumped yet, he's jumping earlier at the perfect time to get it at his highest point, to not even allow the DBs surrounding him to even get a chance to get their hand on it. But also just a dot from Sam Howell. Great game today, man, reading the field and everything. Now in the first quarter, basically this applies for everybody, not only just the quarterback, not only just the offense, just in general. The first quarter was just bad. Excluding the first quarter, Sam Howell looked like a top 10 quarterback out there, but you got to take into account the first quarter. So, overall, I would definitely give him an A- at least, man. A lot of that wasn't his fault. A lot of it was the offensive line, but some of it was, which is back to my main point that I was leading into before I started digressing again. He was not getting the ball out of his hands at times. There were times where he should have just thrown it out of bounds, took a sack or whatever. He should have just threw it out early or got it to an open receiver before the play broke down. So some of the problems that looked like may have been on the offensive line were actually Sam Howell's faults at times. But overall, man, 299 yards throwing. Wish he got 300. 2 touchdowns. 108.8 QBR. I mean, like, I don't know what more you want. Like, I know it's only 2 games, technically 3 for him dating back to the Cowboys last year. We don't want to call him an elite quarterback yet because that Cardinals game was up and down, and then this Broncos game started pretty ugly. But this guy has top 15 quarterback traits. Does he have the exact resume yet? No, but do not be surprised by the end of the season. Even non-Commanders fans are calling Sam Howell a top 15 quarterback in the NFL because he's showing that. The game he had today, especially down, I mean, name how many quarterbacks you think could be down 21-3 in Denver. Week 2, offense still not completely gelling yet. New offensive coordinator, technically new starting quarterback, only started 1 game last year. I mean, just a new offensive line, except for technically left tackle Charles Leno, and he probably had the worst game out of all of the offensive linemen today, which is ironic because he had the best game last week against the Cardinals, and a lot of advanced statistics and Pro Football Focus grades literally had him as a top 8, top 5 tackle in the NFL. Then he comes out against the Broncos and shows what a lot of y'all feel like is his true colors. Had a really bad game. But either way, all of that going on, new quarterback, new offensive coordinator, basically a new offensive line, and the only continuing piece that's playing the exact same position he played last year is Charles Leno, and he got mutilated, especially in the first half, and even at times in the second half. Down 21-3, name me the quarterbacks that can make that comeback right down. Down 21-3 with those circumstances, those factors. In Denver, again, remember that, high altitude, hardest environment to win an away game, especially to be down 21-3 and find a way to win. Come on, dog. He's a top 15 quarterback. I don't care. I'm going to go ahead and say it now because, I mean, some people are going to say it later because they just feel like they got to see more. But I've seen enough to know Sam Howell. Again, my main thing with him, my favorite trait of his, and one thing that a lot of people that know me in real life when I play sports and stuff, that what they compliment me on, or even just video games, whatever, I'm next play, man. It doesn't matter how bad of a play I am. It doesn't matter how serious pressure of a situation it is. Like, my whole thing has always been I'm calm, collected, and if anything, when things get more pressure, I'm at my best. And Sam Howell has that exact trait, but at a way higher level because I don't play in the NFL. I'm down 21-3, all of that. Bad play, misread, sack, that's his fault, incomplete pass, inaccurate pass, and he just bounces back the next play like as if that play before never happened. Like he just threw a touchdown the previous play. Like he still got the same confidence and swag even after a bad play as if he had a good play beforehand. That's my favorite trait of his. There are a lot of traits from Sam Howell that I love, absolutely love, and why I feel like he's a franchise quarterback and potentially a future Hall of Famer for us, and it's probably going to lead us to at least 1 Super Bowl. But the reason I have him as a top 15 quarterback already, again, people are going to start saying it later, I'm just going to say it now, is because of that trait right there, where Mr. Next Play, he has that thing that cornerbacks need, where quarterbacks need it too, but cornerbacks really need it, where you get beat and you just got to act like it never happened, delete your memory, and move on. Sam Howell definitely has that. So I'm really excited, man. I really think We got us one right here. And also, I want to point out the fact that Sam Howell is clearly and by far the best quarterback out of all of the second-year guys from that 2022 class. Like that, Malik Willis, Kenny Pickett. I love Malik Willis, Westlake alumni, just like me. Cam Newton, Adam Paxman-Jones, all of these guys that I root for. But Malik Willis is not Sam Howell at all. Kenny Pickett isn't Sam Howell. Desmond Ridder surprised me today. Not Sam Howell. I mean, it's just, hey, man, pick another one. Pick out names. I mean, I guess you could say, guess Brock Purdy. But then again, the 49ers are a great team, and I think Sam Howell has outplayed them so far this season, personally. Like Sam Howell versus Brock Purdy, I think Sam Howell has been the better quarterback. But the 49ers are a great team. Shouts out to Brock Purdy for doing what you need to do to win games. But yeah, man, Sam Howell's different. I think he's top 15 quarterback to me already, and he has the potential to become even better than that. Also, oh yeah, forgot, I have this towel right here because them Broncos is nervous. They nervous. My mom put this together this morning just for the game, so I got my they nervous towel, man. And the Broncos was nervous, up 21-3. How you get nervous like that? Yes, sir. Forget a terrible towel, man. We got the they nervous towel going on. Now I can move that from the. I literally put that on the mic so I wouldn't forget it, and I somehow went 25 minutes forgetting it. But yeah, man, let's get to it. Moving on from quarterback, I guess we can go ahead and go running back now. Brian Robinson was the star of the show. Antonio Gibson made some great plays, but Brian Robinson was the star, dog. 87 rushing yards on 18 attempts, 4.8 yards per carry is crazy. If you rush for 4.8 yards every time you touch the ball, that is a first down every set of downs, which is amazing. And everybody, I mean, Antonio Gibson had the lowest yards per carry with 4.5. I'll take it. That run game was beautiful between the offensive line, Eric Bieniemy's play designing and calling. Everybody who ran the ball, and we ran for a total of 122 yards, which is also pretty good as well. But at the very least, Antonio Gibson had 4.5 yards per carry, which led to a team-wide 5.3 yards per carry. But back to Brian Robinson, 87 rushing yards, along with 42 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. Are you kidding me? And he had his first multi-touchdown game of his career so far. So I know a lot of people that were probably nervous in fantasy. Like, is Brian Robinson ever going to get a large enough percentage of carries and touches and looks in the passing game to be a true fantasy option? Well, it looks like the answer is yes. Because Brian Robinson had 18 carries. The next most was Sam Howell or Antonio Gibson, whichever one, with 2 carries each. And Curtis Samuel had 1 carry for 13 yards. Brian Robinson is the running back. It's his show. Chris Rodriguez came in at fullback at times, but he never got the ball. It's the Brian Robinson show. So if for some reason Brian Robinson, if y'all able to sneak him in some fantasy drafts, or if for some crazy reason he's available in your fantasy draft, you need to go get him. If there's one player that you can bet to be a consistent fantasy option on this team, I would bet it's Brian Robinson. He's the star of the show. He was the star of the show today. He's definitely one of the top 5, top 8 players from this game. You could argue, I could see somebody making an argument for him being the best player from this game. That man balled out, dog. His vision was great. His patience was great. One big thing that I noticed from that Cardinals game is that none of our running backs, including Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson, we were getting no yards after contact. We were breaking no tackles. We were juking nobody out of their socks. And I'm pretty sure Randy Jordan made sure he got that message across in practice this past week, because Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson look so different out there making people miss or breaking tackles. They were running harder. They were running faster. They were more decisive and determined. They looked like completely different running backs this week than last week. You can't blame it all on offensive line. There were holes there at times for the offensive line last week against the Cardinals, and Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson just couldn't make the most of it. They just couldn't. I don't know what it was. I really don't. But this week is how I expect them to always be, so I hope last week was the outlier and not this week. But either way, I think that's one of the biggest improvements from the running back group, is that they finally made people miss and got yards after contact today. They were getting basically none last week. They got a bunch this week. I'm so proud of those guys. But staying with the running backs, going from Brian Robinson, who was the star of the show. Shout out to Antonio Gibson. Thank you, Eric Bieniemy, for scheming him up in a way that works best for him. He has a fumble problem. He fumbled last week against the Cardinals. He was fumbling the year before that. So we may be afraid of that. So what we're going to do, we're going to limit his carries. Brian Robinson is 18, but Antonio Gibson will get the occasional. He got 2 carries a day. But also in the passing game, that boy Antonio Gibson had 3 catches on 3 targets for 44 yards, especially one of those big time screens, man. And of course, Brian Robinson, 3 targets, 2 2 catches for 42 yards. Amazing. With his longest being 21. Antonio Gibson's longest went for 36. Yeah, that's what you got to do with those guys, bro. Eric Bieniemy has unlocked something in his running back group. He's unlocked something in his offense, period, but something that we just could not get going. Even with Brian Robinson's talent and Antonio Gibson's talent, we just couldn't get this going. It just seems so obvious. Like, we have 2 really dynamic running backs, and everybody's saying we need running back. We need to go get Kareem Hunt. We need to go get trade for Jonathan Taylor and stuff like that. I'm like, no, the running back group has talent. It's just up to the offensive coordinator and the offensive line partially as well to get that talent out of these guys, to allow them to ball out. And Eric Bieniemy, it took him, just like it took him 2 games to do a lot of other things, it took him 2 games to finally figure out this running back group, which Scott Turner kind of struggled with last year. Even though there were times where Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson had good games last year, this was just like a beautiful use of those guys. It was just masterful. It was poetic how Eric Bieniemy got the greatness out of these guys, man. That was absolutely amazing. So I'm really proud of everybody. I really am. Y'all don't understand. Then moving on to the receivers, man. Terry McLaurin is that guy. You know, a lot of people were starting to think maybe Jahan Dotson's wide receiver 1, and it could change. Any given game, it could be Terry McLaurin with the most targets and receptions. Any given game, it could be Jahan Dotson. But especially with Terry McLaurin dealing with the turf toe injury, even I thought was like, okay, Jahan Dotson would just kind of play the role of a wide receiver 1 until Terry McLaurin's fully healed, and then Terry McLaurin would just be wide receiver 2. Curtis Samuel's going to do his thing amongst all of the chaos, because Curtis Samuel had 1 carry for 13 yards and also had 3 catches for 19 yards, which is pretty straight, as long as being 14. But Terry McLaurin was wide receiver 1 today, point blank, period. 6 targets, 5 receptions, 54 yards, and a touchdown. Again, the touchdown that I talked about earlier, already ad nauseum. That, man, that double team, he wasn't even really open, dog. Like, the Broncos covered that as well as they could, but Sam Howell dot Terry McLaurin top 8 receiver, and he showed it on that play especially, but also some other plays. And then you also had Bieniemy Brown, who had 2 catches on 1 drive, and then I think that was like the second quarter. And then he had another catch in like sometime in the 4th quarter for a big 9-yard gain, which led to 2nd and 1, and I think that was the play maybe right before the Brian Robinson touchdown. I think we scored a touchdown immediately after a Bieniemy Brown 9-yard catch at some point. I don't remember exactly how. Even Byron Pringle got a catch. I remember seeing that and was excited. I was like, yay. Shouts out to Byron Pringle. John Dotson had 5 targets, 3 catches, 22 yards. I predicted him to have a ridiculous game today, but Terry McLaurin just basically took over and had the game that I expected Jahan Dotson to have. Hey, man, this receiving group unlocked. Now moving on to the tight ends. I mean, really interesting game from those guys. I mean, of course, you target John Bates enough, he's going to have a drop. So he had 1 really bad drop. 5 targets, 3 catches, 46 yards. Out of our tight end group, he had the most yards, but most notably that 35-yard catch where Sam Howell threw the perfect dot to him. And I give Eric Bieniemy the most credit and Sam Howell the second most credit, and then John Bates, I guess, a distant third, because John Bates is wide open. All you got to do is catch it, because Sam Howell basically, he couldn't have literally walked up to John Bates and handed him the ball better than how he threw that ball. That was perfect throw. But also Eric Bieniemy to scheme John Bates open. Like I keep saying, it would be nice to have some really electrifying tight ends, but all I need my tight ends to do is block and catch. That's it. It's really up to the offensive coordinator to scheme guys open when it comes to tight ends. It's very rare ever tight ends come through the league that actually can separate on their own. Jordan Reed was one of those very few guys, which is just so sad why injuries just held him back, and also a bad Redskins team for the most of the time he was there held him back as well, but mostly injuries. But you have Travis Kelce. I guess you got Darren Waller. But even like George Kittle, as great as he is, he's schemed open. He's not just out here route running guys to death and getting open with a really complicated route and things like that. That's rare. That's Kyle Shanahan getting George Kittle open. My boy Brock Bowers coming from Georgia is going to be one of those guys that can get open on his own. But again, even George Kittle doesn't get really open on his own, at least the vast majority of the time that he catches passes. That's up to the offensive coordinator. So another thing that Eric Bieniemy has finally figured out that Scott Turner couldn't is how to get the tight ends open consistently. Now, granted, last year also with Scott Turner, a lot of John Bates, everybody, Logan Thomas were dropping passes. Cole Turner wasn't as good as he is this year, as dependable at the very least in the passing game. All of those guys have improved. I can't wait for Armani Rogers to come back. Y'all know that's my guy. I can't wait. Under this Eric Bieniemy system, our most athletic tight end, like Cole Turner is faster than Logan Thomas and John Bates, but he's not Armani Rogers. I can't wait, man. But I love Cole Turner as well. 2 targets, 2 catches. That's how he's always going to be. His catches, his receptions are going to be the same amount of his targets more times than not. If Sam Howell throws him the ball, he's catching it, and that's huge for Sam Howell's confidence and trust in his not only just receiving group in total, but his tight end group specifically. Being 6'5" and an automatic catch for him is big. Because Logan Thomas is an automatic catch. He had one drop, but ultimately 2 catches for 22 yards, most notably that touchdown. I don't know how you get knocked out with a completely dirty hit like that and still hold on to the ball. That man literally was like knocked out and somehow uncautious basically held on to the ball for a touchdown. We appreciate you, man. Get well soon. That was a crazy play. I mean, honestly, you can almost give Logan Thomas a game ball just for that. Because even plays outside of receiving the ball, he blocked better today than he did against the Cardinals. So, man, shouts out to Eric Bieniemy for unlocking this tight end group. And I just can't wait for us to get the full tight end group going. Curtis Hodges was, of course, inactive today because we don't really expect him to play the way he looked in the preseason. Would you even want him to go out there? Just give Cole Turner any of the targets you would give to Curtis Hodges. Then, of course, Armani Rogers, when he comes back healthy, the freakish athleticism, literally Darren Waller clone type of stuff, maybe even slightly more athletic. Can't wait for Eric Bieniemy to get his hands on him because we're already seeing what he's doing with John Bates. Had a 35-yard long reception today, y'all. Imagine what he's gonna do, man. Oh my God. All right, moving on to the offensive line. I'm not gonna lie, don't persecute me for this, but I feel like the offensive line wasn't as bad as people say. Now, of course, Andrew Wiley had that terrible play where he got beat to the outside. Then Sam Howell got strip sacked and moved us out of the field goal range. And I think that's where Joey Slye missed the field goal. And we had so much momentum going. And then that's literally what killed our momentum. That like shut it down. Then the Broncos came down and almost scored. And I think that's when the Emmanuel Forbes pick. Something happened. Something saved us. I can't remember the exact order of things. But Andrew Wiley was terrible at times. But overall, you didn't really notice him out there, which is a good thing for our offensive lineman. The majority of the game outside of a couple of plays. Charles Leno was by far our best offensive lineman today, offensive tackle, whatever. I mean, penalties. He allowed at least 2 sacks that I remember. I know he definitely had at least 1 or 2 penalties. But the interior offensive line was pretty good. I know Nick Gates got a false start, but I'm still confused as to I'm gonna have to look at that replay to see like how a center gets a false start. Whose fault is that really? But outside of that, Sadiq Charles, one of them big Brian Robinson runs, like a huge one. I think maybe one of the touchdown ones was a Sadiq Charles perfect seal block to open a hole for him. Sadiq Charles was pretty good today. Nick Gates was good. Samuel Cosby to me is one of our best offensive linemen. He's always due to get hurt, it seems like. He just got to come out for a play or two. Ricky Strongberg steps in for him because Chris Paul is still inactive. I don't think Chris Paul hurt. I think they just trust Ricky Strongberg to step in as a backup guard more than Chris Paul right now, which is interesting because I thought Chris Paul was competing for the starting left guard spot. Not only is he not the backup left guard, he's not the backup guard until Ricky Strongberg comes out there. Like, it's wow. Ricky Strongberg has surpassed Chris Paul. I don't think Chris Paul got bad. I just think Ricky Strongberg got that much better. I think that's really notable. Even though Ricky Strongberg only played like 1 or 2 snaps for Samuel Cosmi. Samuel Cosmi came back in, and I think Samuel Cosmi is our best offensive lineman, the only guy that truly has like all pro potential on this team. And doesn't allow anything. Run blocking, pass blocking, dominant. Honestly, I feel like we may even be slightly wasting his time at guard and should probably have him at tackle. But either way, he's been dominating at guard. Just go ahead and let him be Brandon Sheriff, in my opinion. Ricky Strongberg, it's really notable that he has surpassed Chris Paul in the depth chart to the point that Chris Paul is inactive on game days and Ricky Strongberg is your backup center and guard. That's crazy. I don't know where that came from. I saw Ricky Strongberg in the preseason. He looked better than I expected, but I didn't think he was better than Chris Paul already. That's what the coaching staff feels like. Hey, man, congratulations to him. Shouts out to the offensive line, man. They were bad at times, but it was a lot of individual bad stuff. It wasn't like a total bad. The interior offensive line was pretty good. It was just Andrew Wiley at times and Charles Leno a lot of the time. Again, it's ironic that Charles Leno went from being our highest graded, most well-renowned offensive lineman last week against the Cardinals to now probably our worst, and probably even worse than Andrew Wiley somehow. Even though Andrew Wiley right now is the only offensive lineman that's had 2 bad games. Charles Leno had a bad game today, but not against the Cardinals. Had a really good game against the Cardinals. Sadiq Charles has been kind of so-so both games, but had a better game today. Nick Gates had kind of 2 good games in my opinion, but you could argue a better game today than the Cards. But again, I got to look at the all 22 to confirm. Samuel Cosmi's been pretty good both games. Andrew Wiley had a really bad game against the Cardinals, and then a better game today. Andrew Wiley's literally our only player that's on this, only offensive lineman that's had 2 bad games, literally. I mean, I wouldn't even say he had a better game today. It was just less bad. Everybody else has had at least one good game. Andrew Wiley has had 2 straight bad games. So, hey, man, we're going to have to monitor that. I already think we're going tackle in the first round no matter what, even if we got to trade up for one. I'm already knowing. It's going to be between Joe Alt, Olu Fashanu, or my boy Amarius Mims for Georgia. But he's hurt right now, so we'll see how that goes. But Amarius Mims, you can argue, has the highest ceiling of any tackle we've seen come through the draft of all time. I'm just warning y'all now. It's ridiculous. Olu Fashanu, ridiculous ceiling. Joe Alt, same thing. But Marius Mims, even higher ceiling than Broderick Jones and Darnell Wright. It's ridiculous, dog. And DeJuan Jones, in my opinion. But y'all will see. Y'all will see when we get to that part of the football season. Right now, we're focused on the Commanders going to the playoffs and winning the Super Bowl. All right, now moving on to the defense. So far, Ron Rivera has no real update on Daron Payne until they actually get back home to the DMV area, well, really technically Virginia. But Payne limped off the field at one point in time. He was hurt in that goal line stand against the Broncos where we only allowed a field goal. Even after giving them a fresh set of downs with a defensive line penalty. I think that was on Chase Young, I believe, right? But Payne limped off the field at one point and then came back and was playing the rest of the game. Maybe he was just gassed. Maybe he actually ended up getting really hurt. I don't know, but we'll see. But Daron Payne dominated. Let's just go and start with him since we're already talking about him. Daron Payne was different today. There was one drive where he literally took over the drive, dog. Like, you know how hard that is to carry a drive on your back as an interior defensive lineman? Not just defensive lineman, interior defensive lineman, to completely shut down a whole series. First down, sack. Second down, tackle for loss. Third down, pass breakup. Batted down ball on Russell Wilson. How do you completely take over a drive like that as an interior defensive lineman? I mean, you could argue at times today Daron Payne looked like the best defensive lineman in football, best interior defensive lineman in all of the NFL. And that's one thing I love. I talked about this in the live stream, that, like, when we've paid guys, they've gotten better. And that's very noteworthy because typically guys get their payday and get lazy, don't care as much. Well, I mean, we've seen that with Albert Haynesworth. A lot of guys, they get their money and they're like, you know, I got my money, I'm good. Like, I got generational wealth, I'm straight, you know what I'm saying? What's the point of doing that extra push-up, the hunger that I had to do, that extra lap, that extra push-up before I got paid? Why would I keep that after I got paid? I've already made it, I'm good. You know what I'm saying? I can slow down a little bit, I can get a little complacent, I can get a little lazy, because I already got the money. I just got to maintain. I don't have to necessarily get better. Our guys haven't been like that. Terry McLaurin got paid, got better. Jonathan Allen got paid, got better. Pro Bowl for both of those guys. Daron Payne got paid and he had his best season of his NFL career, 11.5 sacks, got paid, and he looks even better this season. It may even outpace his sack total from last year. Like, that's incredible, man. Daron Payne dominated all game, really. But that one drive where he literally took, I can't remember the last time I've seen a defensive lineman do that. I've seen a lot of great defensive linemen, but to completely, literally first, second, and third down, solo the defense, like completely solo the defense, carry the defense on your back, and just completely dominate an offense, just eliminate that drive from the record books by yourself is insane, dog. I have no words for that. I don't know what else to say to y'all. Like, that was ridiculous. Jonathan Allen was kind of quiet today, but I'm pretty sure when we look at the All-22, that man had a solid game. He's probably getting double-teamed and a lot of stuff. And also, hey, man, when you have a great defensive line, like I've said, when it comes to these guys' numbers and why you can't judge them off of the sacks they get every game, it's because you're racing Chase Young, healthy Chase Young, dominant Chase Young. We'll talk about that when we get there. Really good, dominant Montez Sweat, dominant Daron Payne to sacks. Like, even a sack that maybe Jonathan Allen would have gotten, he's a step behind. Daron Payne gets there before him. Montez, well, I'm not saying that's exactly what happened, but when you look at the numbers on these guys, Jonathan Allen didn't have a sack today. Maybe on another defensive line he would have, because he was just a step behind the other guy that did. He would have gotten the sack, but Chase Young, Montez Sweat, and Daron Payne was just so ridiculous today. Poor Jonathan Allen, no stats. So I'm not going to say because Jonathan Allen was quiet today he had a bad game. I'm going to have to look at the All-22 because I felt like he was relatively quiet last game against the Cardinals up until like the third or fourth quarter. And he was graded one of our highest defensive players, I think the highest defensive player. So he just does a lot of the dirty work, a lot of things that a lot of people don't really notice live. That's why I love the trenches, man. Trenches, defensive line is my favorite part of football because they just do so many things that they don't get credit for. So I'm pretty sure Jonathan Allen is okay. It's not like Jonathan Allen's falling off a cliff or anything. It's just that those other guys outshined him. I don't think Jonathan Allen was dark today. I think he shined. Those other guys just outshined him so much that his light just seemed dim in comparison, basically. Moving on to Montez Sweat, man, I didn't really notice him that first half, especially that first. I mean, the first quarter, everybody was bad, point blank, period. I mean, again, touchdown. then forced fumble, then 3-and-out, and after that, I mean, it was just up from there for the defense. So, but the first quarter was terrible. But Montez Sweat, third and fourth quarter, coming out second half, that man dominated. There were some times where Chase Young and Montez Sweat met at the quarterback, and we were saying that okay, we drafted Chase Young number 2 overall. Montez Sweat is already looking good. We're gonna have some moments where they meet at the quarterback, and it's taken a few years to get there, but we finally saw that dream come true against the Broncos. There were times where Chase Young and Montez Sweat literally converging on the quarterback at the same time, hit him at the same time. Maybe one like a half step ahead of the other, but they're literally meeting at the quarterback. Like, okay, pre-snap, okay, I'll see you there. I'll see you at Russell Wilson in about 3 seconds, and then they actually get there together. It's beautiful, man. It's poetry. Today was beautiful, especially defensive line-wise. Magical game today, man. Montez Sweat dominated, especially the second half. Chase Young, let's go ahead and get to him, because negatives, he had 2 bad play, even though I feel like the roughing the passer, I mean, still don't push him. The play is over, don't push him. We could have gotten off the field already right there, but you can't do that. I mean, that's the same exact penalty he suffered against the Falcons where he hit who was it? Matt Ryan at the time, I believe. Maybe. I think it was still Matt Ryan when we played them like 2 years ago. The J.D. McKissick winning touchdown from Taylor Heineke in Atlanta, the game I went to. Chase Young had a very similar penalty. Plays over, pushing the quarterback to the ground, flag. The defense has to stay on the field, and I think they end up giving up points. Same thing like the Falcons. But outside of those 2 penalties, Chase Young dominated, bro. Like I already said, man, Chase Young was all over the place, man. That guy, first of all, had 1.5 sacks in his first game back. Shouts out to him just for that. 2 QB hits. I don't even know how many pressures he had, but I'm pretty sure he had multiple. That guy was out there doing everything. This was his first recorded full sack since October 10th, 2021 versus the New Orleans Saints. A dumb game we ended up losing to like the same, they had the Hail Mary before halftime, just like the Denver Broncos had. So whenever Chase Young gets a sack, we got to worry about teams completing Hail Marys against us. I don't know. I'm just trying to see where everything goes, where the strings align up at. But also, Ron Rivera spoke on Chase Young after the game and said, quote, so doggone anxious to play, he would sometimes go into the field when it even wasn't his turn. Like, he was on snap count. You gotta remember, Chase Young had this dominant performance on snap count. He wasn't even a starting defensive lineman. James Williams technically started. And like Ron Rivera said after the game, there were times where Chase Young tried to run onto the field and they had to literally stop him, even though his name wasn't called. Like, I love that enthusiasm. But man, Chase Young had 1.5 sacks, again, meeting Montez Sweat at the quarterback. And like I said earlier, the Jamin Davis forced fumble came after a Chase Young pressure on Russell Wilson to force him out of the pocket. Jamin Davis ends up getting the forced fumble. Cody Barton recovers. Chase Young was the catalyst for that. Chase Young was the catalyst for that Emmanuel Forbes interception. Emmanuel Forbes gets his first interception. Should have had a second one today. Should have had one against the Cardinals as well. You got to catch better. But a lot of corners, they're corners and not receivers, literally just because they can do everything but catch. That looks like that's Emmanuel Forbes. Even though he's an interception machine in college, I don't know what's going on at the NFL level. He just has butterfingers now all of a sudden. But either way, his first interception came because Russell Wilson had to force a ball out that he wouldn't normally throw if he wasn't under pressure. Guess who had that pressure? Chase Young. So Chase Young was the catalyst for the forced fumble that literally turned this whole team around, turned the whole game around, probably turned this whole season around, this whole franchise around. You never know. That Jamin Davis forced fumble may have like crazy implications later on down the line when we look back and be like, man, where did this season turn around at? Where did we figure out that we were finally that team, that Jamin Davis forced fumble? Again, Chase Young was the catalyst for that, the catalyst for the Emmanuel Forbes interception, and just made plays all over the place. I mean, he set the edge really well at times. The first quarter, ignoring that, because first quarter, he didn't set the edge well. The whole defense was bad, though. Linebackers, defensive line, secondary. Emmanuel Forbes, even as great of a game he had today, got beat really bad in the first quarter for a deep bomb. Like, the defense, period, was bad outside in that first quarter. But outside of that, Chase Young was dominant almost from start to finish. And there were even times in the first quarter he was playing well, but just overall wasn't setting the edge like he was supposed to do at times. But second, third, and fourth quarter, that man was dominant, bro. That Chase Young mattered today, dog. Like, having Chase Young back showed we may not win that game without Chase Young. Like, literally. If Chase Young is not healthy enough to play, we may not win, man. I'm so happy they played him. When you really think about that, it's really crazy how different we would feel about this team, how different this season would feel, our trajectory about can we make the playoffs, can we compete in this NFC East that's super strong, this NFC Beast. I'm going to talk about that later because right now the NFC Beast is looking like the best division of football for a second year in a row. I know people used to call us the NFC Least. Now we're the NFC Beast for now the second year in a row. But we would not have won that game without Chase Young today. First, again, the Jamin Davis forced fumble that literally started everything. The Emmanuel Forbes interception, the 1.5 sacks he had, the 2 QB hits, probably more pressures, some plays he made against the run setting the edge. We don't win that game without Chase Young. We barely got away beating them by 2 points. Without Chase Young, we don't win. We don't come back down 21-3 without Chase Young. That forced fumble that Jamin Davis had. Like, I've been saying it too. Y'all giving up on Chase Young. I know a lot of y'all understand some of y'all are giving up because, like, you got to stay healthy for it to matter. But when he's healthy and he's out there, he makes an impact. Again, I saw enough. Even though he wasn't as great as I hoped when he came back last year, I still think he wasn't 100%. But the way he, like, manhandled Trent Williams one play last year against the 49ers when he returned towards the end of the season, like in late November or something like that, people don't do that to Trent Williams. He's still the best tackle in football. People don't manhandle Trent Williams. I was like, okay, that play is enough right there for me to keep faith in Chase Young. As long as he's healthy, he'll be good to go. He played like a number 2 overall pick today. Point blank, period. Still inconsistent. Also still on snap count, but he looked like a number 2 overall pick today. Point blank, period. I don't want to hear nothing else of it. We got to stop disrespecting Chase Young. I'm glad he had the game he had today to shut a lot of people up. Now, he's got to do it more consistently. He's got to do it over the course of a season. I'm not crowning him an elite player. I'm not saying he's earned that 2nd overall pick yet, but he played like one today. My challenge to him now is to do it game after game after game after game. Don't just be a flash in the pan. Earn that number 2 overall pick, man. Show us. Earn that contract. Him and Montez Sweat looking like right now they're competing for the same contract. And after the first game, Chase Young out, Montez Sweat dominated. I'm like, oh, okay, obviously Montez Sweat gets the contract. Like, it's no question. Now after this game, I'm like, I don't know, man. We got to find a way to dig deep in our pockets and find a way to pay both of those guys. So I don't know how we're going to do it. We got to figure something out type of thing. Hopefully one or both of those guys take a hometown discount because, boy, we're going to need it. And then the rest of the defensive line made plays. Case Hill made a couple of plays. I remember him like batting down the pass at one point, but I think there was a penalty, so it ended up not counting, but I remember that. James Smith-Williams did a pretty good job when he was in the game. Like when Chase Young wasn't in the game, it's not like we were like, man, where's Chase Young? Like James Smith-Williams did a good job handling the edge. He even had a sack. James Smith-Williams had a sack. Like he took Chase Young's powers, like probably Space Jam style. They probably touched the same football at the same time. He's like, bro, I just need it for one play. Just give me one play with your powers. I'll give it right back afterwards and got a sack. Shouts out to James Smith-Williams for that. John Ridgeway did his thing trying to stop the run up the middle. It was terrible in the first quarter, but the rest of the game, they shut down that run game. I mean, there was literally a point in the game where every time the Denver Broncos ran the ball, it went for at minimum 5 yards. And I'm not saying they had 5 yards per carry where like maybe they rushed for 10 one play and one another, which averages out to like 10 yards. Because no. Literally at a certain point in that game, while up 21-3, they never rushed for anything less than 5 yards on any carry. None. There was no carry less than 5. It was terrible at first. The adjustments that Jack Del Rio made, the adjustments that the players made to just be like, wait a minute, we're better than these guys. What are we playing around? I said that before the game in my preview. We are better than the Broncos on paper. We just didn't play like it in the first quarter, and then we came out there and showed that we were the better team for the majority of the game, and that's why we ended up winning. But either way, man, John Ridgeway, outside of the first quarter, was stopping the run. A lot of those guys were stopping the run outside of the first quarter. We did everything right outside of the first quarter, basically. Moving on to the linebackers, Cody Barton, we got to figure something out. I know you're the quarterback of the defense. You're handling that well. We're not having a bunch of like missed assignments like that like we used to in previous years, especially the start years. Normally, we come out the bad starts. We have a lot of miscommunications, wide open wide receivers 80 yards down the field consistently, or guys 20 yards down the field right behind the linebackers open. Somebody's lost. We're not necessarily having that. You're doing a good job mentally. Like, you're getting people where they need to be, making the right calls and adjustments, audibles and defensive audibles. He's doing a good job of being a quarterback of the defense. Everything else, terrible. Coverage, terrible. One of those touchdowns, the receiver went in front of him. Zone coverage went in front of him, not behind him, where it's like, oh, okay, maybe you can kind of understand because maybe he didn't feel the receiver enough to adjust in coverage to make that play to stop the touchdown. No, the receiver went in front. You see the receiver going in front of you. All he did was like literally that much space, like as much space as I have in this box of my room right now with all these screens around me. That man hit this. He hit him with a, that's it, receiver gone, touchdown. Come on, dog. Like, I think it was Cameron Curl or Kendall Fuller that was like, man, what's going on? Like, he tried to tackle the guy before it was a touchdown, but it ended up going for a touchdown. There were a lot of plays, especially in the middle of that game and especially in that first quarter, when the Broncos really needed a play. You know what they did? Went after Cody Barton. Pass, run, didn't matter. Let's go after Cody Barton. Let's throw the ball to the receiver that's in Cody Barton's zone coverage. Let's run the ball his way and dare him to, first of all, make a tackle. Second of all, get off a block. Can Cody Barton get off of an offensive lineman's block? I know it's easier said than done. This man is getting blocked from when the ball is snapped 5 yards down the field to by the time the play ends 10 yards plus down the field. Like literally just getting escorted to the locker room. Cody Barton, mentally great, physically awful. We got to adjust. And the fact that our defense is playing this well in spite of him right now is incredible. Once he starts to even show a little bit of what he was showing towards the end of the season for the Seahawks last year, we're going to be dominant. He's like the wink link right now. Literally go back and look at that game and watch how many times they target Cody Barton, even if it's not a big play, even if it's just like a quick little 4-yard slant. Cody Barton right there, a little 5-yard run up, stop real quick, turn around, catch the ball. Cody Barton zone coverage. Like just target him. You'll get some yards every time. Running or passing, it doesn't matter. Jamin Davis, of course, I mean, I'm going to have to look at the All-22 to give a full synopsis of Jamin Davis because I don't really remember him flashing often this game. But boy, that forced fumble was huge. Again, I've already explained it several different ways. That's literally what changed the game, dog. Literally after that Jamin Davis forced fumble, it was up from there. You could feel it a little bit, but I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to jinx it. I was like, man, we 21-3, this game ain't over. I mean, I've always been the game ain't over until it's over, guy. You know I'm glass half full. I'm Mr. Optimism. People get on my head for always believing even when I shouldn't. But it was after that forced fumble, I was really like, wait a minute. If this offense could get going, because we haven't been bad, we just haven't been great, and if the defense can figure it out and actually be who they're supposed to be, we can really shut this down and come back. And again, not only did we go from 21-3 to gaining the lead, we went from down 18 to up 11. That's incredible. That is unheard of, especially for the Burgundy and Gold, but just in general in football, that's really difficult to do. And then I don't remember Khaleke Hudson and David Mayo ever out there. I don't. And when at the end of the Cardinals game, I noticed that neither of those guys played a single snap. Maybe that's the same thing that happened again today against the Broncos. Again, we don't prioritize linebackers because we don't use them. Cody Barton's going to play 100% of the snaps. Jamin Davis is going to play somewhere between 50 or 70%, and then the other linebackers may literally not play the entire game. Now, we were in some goal line situations where maybe it makes more sense to play David Mayo. Maybe he played a couple of those snaps, but I didn't notice them enough to speak on them. Again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you lies. I'm not just going to make up stuff about Khaleke Hudson and David Mayo to sound smart. I don't remember them guys being on the field, so I'm not going to speak on them. We're going to go ahead and move on to the DB group. Now the DB group, man. Emmanuel Forbes, first career interception. Should have 3 by now, but it is what it is. Great coverage. Got beat bad in the first quarter, but again, everybody got beat in the first quarter. So, hey, man, Emmanuel Forbes, way to make up for it, and great coverage today, looking like a first-round pick. I was telling people, don't worry about Emmanuel Forbes. He's going to ball out, and look at him, balling out. Big play in first quarter. Again, I keep telling you about that bad memory that quarterbacks and cornerbacks need to have. He had that bad memory and came out and balled out for the rest of the game as if that big play never happened. I'm so proud of Emmanuel Forbes. Y'all know that's potentially going to be one of my favorite players in the team because y'all know I love my trash talkers. I'm a big Chad Johnson, Marshawn Lynch, Adam Pac-Man Jones, Cam Newton, when Nakeem Talib's not tripping, Marcus Peters. Like, I'm always Anthony Edwards in basketball. Now, granted, I'm very biased for a lot of those. Cam Newton, Anthony Edwards, Adam Pac-Man Jones, all Atlanta. Pac-Man Jones and Cam Newton literally same high school as me and all of that. So I'm biased, but those are the type of guys I like. I love Shannon Sharp talking his stuff. Even Deion Sanders, the way he talks his stuff. So Emmanuel Forbes has that trash talk in him. I'm not going to say he's Deion Sanders. I don't want to compare him to that because that's, that arguably best corner of all time. I'm not going to say that, but he has that trash talk in him, and also the way that he backs it up with the trash talking. Once I saw his mic'd up when he was talking, I didn't know he had that in him. His whole time in Mississippi State, even as a Georgia Bulldog fan in the same conference going against him and everything, I didn't know he was talking trash like that. Even after we drafted him, I didn't know he was a trash talker. But once we got that mic'd up at some point in training camp, I was like, oh, okay, that's my dog right there for real. I already thought I would like him when we drafted him. I was like, cool, we can work with this. He's a good player. And our main problem as a defense is turnovers. We were a top 5 defense while also being one of the worst turnover creating defenses in the NFL. That's like an anomaly. That's almost impossible. How are you a top 5 defense but don't get turnovers? That's like literally impossible. That was the last missing piece. So drafting Emmanuel Forbes made total sense to me. And now he's showing y'all, for a lot of y'all that don't like him, why he was drafted in the first round and why we even potentially even willing to trade up to get him. Now moving on from Emmanuel Forbes because he had a great game today, again, outside of the first quarter, but again, that applies to everybody. So at this point, it's redundant to even say it. Benjamin St. Juice, pretty good game today. I mean, again, if you don't hear a corner's name, that means he's doing a good job. Now, maybe the first quarter he was awful. I don't know. Again, I'm more of a trenches guy, so I'm more so paying attention to what the defensive line is doing and stuff like that. Most notably, Chase Young today, because I was like, debut, time to put up and shut up. Time to shut some people up and ball out. So I was mostly paying attention to him. I'm going to have to go back and look at the all 22 to really see what the DBs are doing. Because a lot of the times you can't even see him on camera. So, like, how do you know on a snap-to-snap basis? Again, I'm not going to sit here and make stuff up for y'all just to try to sound smart. I don't know what Benjamin St. Juste basically did today outside of that pass interference he had on two-point conversion. Well, I remember a couple of plays he had good coverage, but I can't really speak on them. But, man, that pass interference, I don't want to hear nothing, Broncos fans, because y'all didn't have any sympathy for us when the Giants were tackling and completely wrapping up Curtis Samuel in the game against the Giants, where they should have called it, we should have won. Last year. I don't want to hear nothing. Y'all didn't have any sympathy for us. I'm not having any sympathy for y'all, because, yes, that was a pass interference on Benjamin St. Juste. But also, one thing that Burgundy and Gold fans have learned over the years, you have to play well enough to beat the refs even calling games against you. And I feel like this game was pretty even 50-50 for the most part. But as us Commanders fans, we're used to the refs siding with the opponent, especially since Dan Snyder was the owner. Maybe that's a new thing now. Now that Josh Harris is the owner, maybe the refs don't hate on us as much. There were a few bad calls against us that I was like, nah, y'all tripping. But overall, it's not as bad as when Dan Snyder was here, when the refs were blatantly trying to make us lose. And most notably, that game against the Giants last year, that second game where they just missed complete. I mean, I don't even think they missed it. I think it's literally just rigged. Like, we can't call those. The Giants have to beat the Commanders. The NFL gods say so. The script says so type of stuff. Dan Snyder's still the owner. And until he's not the owner, we're not giving them no leeway, no nothing. Now that Josh Harris is the owner, now we finally get the advantage of refs pulling their whistle and things like that. So I feel no sympathy towards y'all. Yes, that was a pass interference, but do I care? No, we won. And back to my main point, as Commanders fans, Washington football team fans, Redskins fans for like the past 30 years, again, longer than I've been alive, we've learned that you got to outplay the refs, which is my main point. It doesn't matter if the refs make bad calls. You shouldn't be in a situation where bad calls can make you win or lose a game. So at the end of the day, you can't go. Us as a fan base have learned that because we're used to the refs hating on us. So we know, hey, man, at this point, we just got to beat people by 20 points so ref calls can't even win or lose the game for us. And Broncos, y'all are now learning that same lesson that we've had to deal with for the past 25, 30 years. So again, no sympathy for us. I'm sorry. And then I didn't really notice any other corners. Danny Johnson, anybody out there, Kendall Fuller. Again, if you don't notice a corner, that means that if he was out there, he's doing a good job because they're not getting beat. But moving on to the secondary, Percy Butler got beat real bad for one of those touchdowns. Derek Forrest, I felt like, had a pretty good game today. Cameron Curl had an amazing game today outside of tipping the ball up on the Hail Mary to allow them to get the touchdown to sink our hearts into our stomachs, man. Hey, man. Outside of that, Cameron Curl had a ridiculous game. He was out there covering people that weren't even his responsibility. Usually like a Cody Barton failed coverage. Cameron Curl's having to come up and make the play for him. And then couple of plays before that terrible Hail Mary play, Cameron Curl ran the effort to run down Russell Wilson to tackle him before he gets out of bounds, which took off like 20 seconds from the clock, which is probably, you can argue domino effect wise why we won the game. Probably like a game winning play from him at the end of the day, but he also gave them a game losing play right back afterwards. But overall, outside of that, Cameron Curl was dominant today. Derek Forrest, I didn't really notice him much, but when I did, he was making good plays. Percy Butler, outside of that play, huge play in the first quarter, I felt like he played decent from the times I saw him. But again, secondary, we got to look at the all-22 to get a real picture of what happened. Now, before we get up out of here and move to special teams, also the Commanders have now moved into the positive in both offensive and defensive EPA per play after this win against the Denver Broncos. We're one of the only few teams that's actually in the box that has positive for both defense and offense. You have the Cowboys, you have the 49ers, the Ravens, the Bills, the Packers, Buccaneers, Falcons, and Eagles. No other team is positive in both defense and offense. So that's really noteworthy. That's pretty cool. Even the Dolphins, as high flying as their offense is, they're super negative when it comes to the defensive side. But it doesn't matter. The offense is so explosive, they'll be all right anyway. Now moving on to the secondary. Again, Cameron Cheeseman, can we figure this out, bro? You literally cost us that first missed field goal. That was definitely your fault, not Joey Sly's. Now, granted, the second one was probably Joey Sly's fault. Joey Sly made all 3 of his extra points. I appreciate him for that. He pretty much made 9 points for us because he made 2 out of the 4 of his field goals. So 9 of those 35 points were Joey Sly. But he should have made another one to make it 12, and we should have won 38-33. But it's cool. And then Cameron Cheeseman should have not have messed up the snap, so we should have won 41-33. That game should have been super over at a certain point with no chance of them even trying to throw a Hail Mary to win it, but it's cool. Joey Slye, you got to be better, but more importantly, Cameron Cheeseman has to be better. And I like what I'm seeing from Jamison Crowder. He hasn't bobbled or muffed the punt yet, and then when he gets a chance to even do the slightest return, he maximizes the yards you can get. Like, instead of getting a 2-yard return, he turns it into like a 4 or 5. So I'm liking that, and I think he's eventually may break one at some point. Or at the very least get like a really good 40-50 yard return. I definitely see it happening eventually. So I'm really excited about Jamison Crowder there. And then Tress Way is still just a demon. Tress Way is still like goated, so nothing else to say there. Now moving on. Ron Rivera said after the game, quote, "It's about resilience, but we also have to stop putting ourselves in that position," unquote. Not completely agree. Again, like I said to start off this video, like within the first couple of minutes, can we please do what we did in the middle of the game at the beginning of the games? Can we go on a 32-6 run to start the game, like a 32-6 lead, and then we figure it out after that, rather than being down 21-3 and having to go on a 32-6 run to win the game? Can we please do that? Please? Also, shouts out to Magic Johnson. Of course, he had his tweet, and I love the fact that he said "our" in this tweet. He said "our." It was good to get a road victory. It feels great to be 2-0. Our defense had 7 sacks and stepped up when they needed to. My Commanders should celebrate tonight because tomorrow it's time to get back to work and focus on the Bills next Sunday. And I'm telling y'all, that Bills game is more winnable than a lot of y'all think. I'm telling y'all, the Bills are not completely unbeatable. They've had a rough first 2 games, and we have found ways to win games. This is not the same team that played the Bills a couple of years ago where we got mutilated. It's not, bro. This is a completely different defense. This is a completely different offense. I'm excited about that game. I'm way more optimistic about that game now than I was just a few days ago before this Broncos game. Also, shouts out to the NFC East right now because we are definitely the NFC Beast and not the NFC Least. We all have a combined 7-1 record right now. We are running the NFL. We have the best division in football. The only loss that an NFC East team has right now is to another NFC East team. The Giants' only loss, the only loss in the NFC East division is the Giants against the Cowboys. So the only teams that can beat us right now are literally just other teams in the same division. The NFC East teams can only be beaten by other NFC East teams so far. It's a long season, but we right now are the best division in football without a doubt, no question. Like we were the best division in football last year, so I'm not surprised. And then shouts up, speaking of the Cowboys, you even see Skip Bayless. Now we're getting that notoriety. You've seen all offseason, we're starting to get more like notoriety. ESPN First Take talking about us, Undisputed talking about us, all of that type of stuff. Skip Bayless even just tweeted, Cowboys Nation, Washington is no longer an automatic W. That's it. That's all Skip Bayless had to say. You know, he's a diehard Cowboys fan and all of that type of stuff. But even he has to admit, hey, man, them Commanders is tough. And now before we get up out of here, again, the Commanders are one of only 9 teams that are still undefeated at this point in the season. You have the Cowboys, NFC East, of course, Ravens, Falcons, Dolphins, 49ers, Buccaneers, Cleveland, and the Philadelphia Eagles, of course, who haven't looked that good in their 2 wins so far, but we'll see. And then us. So there's already a debate going on right now. Who's the best team that's still undefeated in the NFL right now? You can make a case for us, man. We had a good win against a bad team the defense only allowed 9 points against the Cardinals. The rest of those points came from Andrew Wiley getting beat bad, Sam Howell, strip sack, touchdown. Technically, we only allowed the Cardinals to score 9 points. And then this resilient, crazy 21-3 comeback from behind win to go up by more than a touchdown during that comeback. We just kept the momentum going. We didn't just take the lead and stop. We kept going and had more than one score over them. You can argue maybe us. I mean, I know I wouldn't necessarily say us, and I know probably nobody in the national media would say us just yet, but do not sleep on us. We're looking like a playoff team right now, but we got to go out there and win these meaningful games. We got to beat guys like the Bills and the Eagles. We got to beat, again, the NFC Beast right now, the best division in football. We got to win games in our division. So, hey, man, we haven't passed all tests yet, but we've passed some serious tests and definitely passed certain milestones that we just couldn't reach. Like I said, we're doing things that we haven't done since the 1990s. We're doing things that we haven't done since 2010, since the pandemic. Right now, this team is on fire, and I'm hoping we can take that momentum into the Bills game and beat them. We start 3-0 beating the Bills. hey man, you're gonna start seeing us talked about on First Take in all kinds of places way more often than we already are since this offseason, since Josh Harris bought the team, Eric Bieniemy became our offensive coordinator, and people started to believe in Sam Howell a little bit. You know what I'm saying? NFL Network is starting to talk about us. We never get talked about on these shows ever, unless it's something bad. So I'm excited about that. I mean, we don't need them. Like, I mean, I prefer to win. I care way more about winning than them talking about us, but it's still cool that you can actually turn on ESPN and hear people talk about the Commanders for more than just a quick little 2 minutes moving on. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get a notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated videos just like this one. I really appreciate y'all, man. Appreciate all y'all that pulled up to the live stream. We started live streaming 30 minutes before the game like I always do, and y'all stayed all the way through until the end of the game, and even a few minutes after the game where I, gave some of my in-game thoughts and opinions and things like that. So man, I really appreciate y'all liking up the streams, all of that type of stuff. Appreciate the support. Right now, again, YouTube is tripping right now, so the only way to support the channel truthfully is like all the way through, like for me to actually receive any real money, is for y'all to donate through the Cash App and PayPal. Cash App is $RicoScores and it's in the description, and the PayPal is WilliamHC94@gmail.com, which is also in the description. I really appreciate y'all. Appreciate all the support, man. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.